low, deep, and right behind me. I close my eyes briefly and inhale a steadying breath before quietly exhaling, hoping he doesn't notice his voice has any effect on me whatsoever. I like it. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's interesting. Your sister has good taste. He steps around me so that he's at my side, facing me. He takes a step closer until he's so close, he brushes my arm. You brought a date? He's asking it like it's a casual question, but I know it isn't. When I fail to respond, he leans in until he's whispering in my ear. He repeats himself, but this time it isn't a question. You brought a date. I find the courage to look over at him and instantly wish I hadn't. He's in a black suit that makes the scrubs look like child's play. First I swallow the unexpected lump in my throat and then I say, is it a problem that I brought a date? I look away from him and back at the photograph hanging on the wall. I was trying to make things easier on you. You know. Just trying to make it stop. He smirks and then downs the rest of his wine. How thoughtful of you, Lily. He tosses his empty wine glass toward a trash can in the corner of the room. He makes the shot, but the glass shatters when it hits the bottom of the empty container. I glance around me, but no one saw what just happened. When I look back at Ryle, he's halfway down a hallway. He disappears into a room and I stand here, looking at the picture again. That's when I see it. The picture is blurred, so it was hard to make out at first. But I can recognize that hair from anywhere. That's my hair. It's hard to miss, along with the marine-grade polymer lounge chair I'm lying on. This is the picture he took on the rooftop the first night we met. He must have had it blown up and distorted so no one would notice what it was. I bring my hand to my neck, because my blood feels like it's bubbling. It's really warm in here. Alyssa appears at my side. It's weird, huh, she says, looking at the picture. I scratch at my chest. It's really hot in here, I say. Don't you think? She glances around the room. Is it? I hadn't noticed, but I'm a little drunk. I'll tell Marshall to turn on the air. She disappears again, and the more I stare at the picture, the angrier I get. The man has a picture of me hanging in the apartment. He bought me flowers. He's giving me attitude because I brought a date to his sister's party. He's acting like there's actually something between us, and we've never even kissed. It all hits me at once. The anger, the irritation, the half glass of champagne I had in the kitchen. I'm so mad, I can't even think straight. If the guy wants to have sex with me so bad, he shouldn't have fallen asleep. If he doesn't want me to swoon, he shouldn't buy me flowers. He shouldn't hang cryptic pictures of me where he lives. All I want is fresh air. I need fresh air. Luckily, I know just where to find it. Moments later, I burst through the door to the rooftop. There are stragglers from the party up here. 3 of them, seated on the patio furniture. I ignore them and walk to the ledge with the good view and lean over it. I suck in several deep breaths and try to calm myself down. I want to go downstairs and tell him to make up his damn mind, but I know I need to have a clear head before I do that. The air is cold, and for some reason, I blame that on Ryle. Everything is his fault tonight. All of it. Wars, famine, gun violence, it all somehow links back to Ryle. Can we have a few minutes alone? I spin around, and Ryle is standing near the other guests. Immediately, all 3 of them nod and begin to stand up to give us privacy. I hold up my hands and say, wait, but none of them look at me. It's not necessary. Really, you don't have to leave. Ryle stands stoically with his hands in his pockets while one of the guests mutters, it's fine, we don't mind. They begin to file back down the stairwell. I roll my eyes and spin back toward the ledge once I'm alone with him. Does everyone always do what you say? I ask, irritated. He doesn't respond. His footsteps are slow and deliberate as he closes in on me. My heart begins to beat like it's on a speed date, and I start scratching at my chest again. Lily, he says from behind me. I turn around and grip the ledge behind me with both hands. His eyes journey down to my cleavage. As soon as they do, I yank at the top of my dress so he can't see it, and then I grip the ledge again. He laughs and takes another step closer. We're almost touching now, and my brain is mush. It's pathetic. I'm pathetic. I feel like you have a lot to say, he says. So I'd like to give you the opportunity to speak your naked truth.
Ha!
I say with a laugh. Are you sure about that? He nods, so I prepare to let him have it. I push against his chest and make my way around him so that he's the one leaning against the ledge now. I can't tell what you want, Ryle. And every time I get to the point where I start to not give a shit, you show up again out of the blue. You show up at my work, you show up at my apartment door, you show up at parties, you. I live here, he says, excusing the last one. That pisses me off even more. I clench my fists.
Ugh.
You're driving me crazy. Do you want me or do you not? He stands up straight and takes a step toward me. Oh, I want you, Lily. Make no mistake about that. I just don't want to want you. My whole body sighs at that comment. Partly out of frustration and partly because everything he says makes me shiver and I hate that I allow him to make me feel like this. I shake my head. You don't get it, do you? I say, softening my voice. I feel too defeated right now to keep yelling at him. I like you, Ryle. And knowing that you only want me for one night makes me really, really sad. And maybe if this were a few months ago, we could have had sex and it would have been fine. You would have walked away and I could have easily moved on with my life. But it's not a few months ago. You waited too long, and too many pieces of me are invested in you now, so please. Stop flirting with me. Stop hanging pictures of me in your apartment. And stop sending me flowers. Because when you do those things, it doesn't feel good, Ryle. It actually kind of hurts. I feel deflated and exhausted and I'm ready to leave. He regards me silently and I respectfully give him time to make his rebuttal. But he doesn't. He just turns around, leans over the ledge, and stares down at the street like he didn't hear a single word I said. I walk across the roof and open the door, half expecting him to call out my name or ask me not to leave. I get all the way back to the apartment before I finally lose all hope of that happening. I push through the crowd and make it through 3 different rooms before I spot Devin. When he sees the look on my face, he just nods and begins to make his way across the room toward me. Ready to go, he asks, looping his arm through mine. I nod. Yes. So ready. We find Alyssa in the main living room. I tell her and Marshall goodnight, using the excuse that I'm just exhausted from opening week and I'd like to get some sleep before work tomorrow. Alyssa gives me a hug and walks us to the front door. I'll be back on Monday, she says to me, kissing me on the cheek. Happy birthday, I say to her. Devin opens the door, but right before we step into the hallway, I hear someone yell my name. I turn around and Ryle is pushing through the crowd on the other side of the room. Lily, wait, he yells, still trying to make his way over to me. My heart is erratic. He's walking quickly, stepping around people, growing more frustrated with every person in his way. He finally reaches a break in the crowd and makes eye contact with me again. He holds my gaze as he marches toward me. He doesn't slow down. Alyssa has to step out of his way as he walks straight up to me. At first, I think he might kiss me, or at least give a rebuttal to everything I said to him upstairs. But instead, he does something I'm not at all prepared for. He scoops me up into his arms. Ryle? I yell, gripping him around the neck, afraid he might drop me. Put me down. He has an arm wrapped under my legs and one under my back. I need to borrow Lily for the night, he says to Devin. That okay? I look at Devin and shake my head, wide-eyed. Devin just smirks and says, "Be my guest." Traitor. Ryle starts to turn and walk back toward the living room. I look at Alyssa as I pass her. Her eyes are wide with confusion. "I'm going to kill your brother." I yell at her. Everyone in the entire room is staring now. I'm so embarrassed, I just press my face against Ryle's chest as he walks me down the hallway and into his bedroom. Once the door is shut behind us, he slowly lowers my feet back to the floor. I immediately start to yell at him and try to push him out of the way of the bedroom door, but he spins me and shoves me against the door, grabbing both of my wrists. He presses them against the wall above my head and says, "Lily?" He's looking at me so intently, I stop trying to fight him off of me and I hold my breath. His chest is pressing against mine, my back is pressed to the door. And then his mouth is on mine. Warm pressure against my lips. Despite the strength behind them, his lips are like silk. I'm shocked at the moan that rushes through me, and even more shocked when I part my lips and want more. His tongue slides against mine and he releases my wrists to grab my face. His kiss grows deeper and I grasp at his hair, pulling him closer, feeling the kiss in my entire body. Both of us become a medley of moans and gasps as the kiss brings us over the edge, our bodies wanting more than our mouths can deliver. I feel his hands as he reaches down and grabs my legs, lifting me up and hooking them around his waist. My God, this man can kiss. It's as if he takes kissing as seriously as he takes his profession. He begins to pull me away from the door when I'm hit with the realization that yes, his mouth is capable of a lot. But what his mouth has failed to do is respond to everything I told him upstairs. For all I know, I've just given in. I'm giving him what he wants, a one-night stand. And that's the last thing he deserves right now. I pull my mouth from his and push on his shoulders. Put me down. He keeps walking toward his bed, so I say it again. Ryle, put me down right now. He stops walking and lowers me to the floor. I have to back away and face the other direction to gather my thoughts. Looking at him while I still feel his lips on mine is more than I can deal with right now. I feel his arms go around my waist, and he rests his head on my shoulder. "I'm sorry," he whispers. He turns me around and brings a hand up to my face and brushes his thumb across my cheek. "It's my turn now, okay?" I don't respond to his touch. I keep my arms folded across my chest and wait to hear what he has to say before I allow myself to respond to his touch. "I had that picture made the day after I took it," he says. "It's been in my apartment for months now, because you were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen and I wanted to look at it every single day." "Oh. And that night I showed up at your door? I went searching for you because no one in the history of my life has ever crawled under my skin and refused to leave like you did. I didn't know how to handle it. And the reason I sent you flowers this week is because I am really, really proud of you for following your dream. But if I sent you flowers every time I've had the urge to send you flowers, you wouldn't even be able to fit inside your apartment. Because that's how much I think about you. And yes, Lily. You're right. I'm hurting you, but I'm hurting, too. And until tonight. I didn't know why. I have no idea how I even possibly find the strength to speak after that. Why are you hurting? He drops his forehead to mine and says, "Because. I have no idea what I'm doing. You make me want to be a different person, but what if I don't know how to be what you need? This is all new to me and I want to prove to you that I want you for so much more than just one night." He looks so vulnerable right now. I want to believe the genuine look in his eye, but he's been so adamant since the day that I met him that he wants the exact opposite of what I want. And it terrifies me that I'll give in to him and he'll walk away. How do I prove myself to you, Lily? Tell me and I'll do it. I don't know. I barely know the guy. I know him enough to know that sex with him won't be enough for me, though. But how do I know sex won't be the only thing he wants? My eyes instantly lock with his. Don't have sex with me. He stares at me for a moment, completely unreadable. But then he starts to nod his head like he's finally getting it. Okay, he says, still nodding. Okay. I will not have sex with you, Lily Bloom. He walks around me to his bedroom door and he locks it. He flips off the light, leaving only a lamp on, and then takes off his shirt as he walks toward me. What are you doing? He tosses his shirt on a chair and then slips off his shoes. We're going to sleep. I glance at his bed. Then at him. Right now? He nods and walks over to me. In one swift movement, he lifts my dress up and over my head, until I'm standing in the middle of his bedroom floor in my bra and panties. I cover myself, but he doesn't even look twice. He pulls me toward the bed and lifts the covers for me to crawl in. As he's walking over to his side of the bed, he says, "It's not like we haven't slept together before without having sex." Piece of cake. I laugh. He reaches his dresser and plugs his phone into a charger. I take a moment to skim his bedroom. This certainly isn't the type of spare bedroom I'm used to. 3 of my bedrooms could fit in here. There's a couch against the other wall, a chair facing a television and a full office off the bedroom that looks complete with a floor-to-ceiling library. I'm still trying to see everything around me when the lamp goes off. Your sister is really rich, I say as I feel him pull the covers over both of us. What the hell does she do with the $10 an hour I pay her? Wipe her ass with it? He laughs and grabs my hand, sliding his fingers through mine. She probably doesn't even cash the checks, he says. Have you ever checked? I haven't. Now I'm curious. Good night, Lily, he says. I can't stop smiling, because this is kind of ridiculous. And so great. Good night, Ryle. I think I might be lost. Everything is so white and so clean, it's blinding. I shuffle through one of the living rooms and try to find my way to the kitchen. I have no idea where my dress ended up last night, so I pulled on one of Ryle's shirts. It falls past my knees, and I wonder if he has to buy shirts that are too big for him just so they'll fit his arms. There are too many windows and way too much sun, so I'm forced to shield my eyes as I go in search of coffee. I push through the kitchen doors and find a coffee maker. Thank you, Jesus. I set it to brew and then go in search for a mug when the kitchen door opens behind me. I spin around and I'm relieved to see that Alyssa isn't always a perfect concoction of makeup and jewelry. Her hair is in a messy topknot and mascara is smeared down her cheeks. She points at the coffee maker. I'm gonna need me some of that, she says. She pulls herself up on the island and then slouches forward. Can I ask you a question? I say. She barely has the energy to nod. I wave my hand around the kitchen. How did this happen? How in the hell did your entire house become spotless between the party last night and me waking up just now? Did you stay up and clean? She laughs. We have people for that, she says. People? She nods. Yep. There are people for everything, she says. You'd be surprised. Think of something. Anything. We probably have people for it. Groceries? People, she says. Christmas decor? She nods. People for that, too. What about birthday gifts? Like for family members? She grins. Yep. People. Everyone in my family receives a gift and a card for every occasion and I never have to lift a finger. I shake my head. Wow. How long have you been this rich? 3 years, she says. Marshall sold a few apps he developed to Apple for a lot of money. Every 6 months, he creates updates and sells those, too. The coffee transitions into a slow drip, so I grab a mug and fill it up. You want anything in yours? I ask. Or do you have people for that? She laughs. Yes. I have you, and I'd like sugar, please. I stir some sugar into her cup and walk it over to her, then pour myself a cup. It grows quiet for a while as I mix in creamer, waiting for her to say something about me and Ryle. The conversation is inevitable. Can we just get the awkwardness out of the way, she says. I sigh, relieved. Please. I hate this. I face her and take a sip of my coffee. She sets hers down beside her and then grips the countertop. How did that even happen? I shake my head, trying my best not to smile like I'm love-struck. I don't want her to think I'm weak or a fool for giving in to him. We met before I knew you. She tilts her head. Wait, she says. Before we got to know each other better or before we knew each other at all? At all, I say. We had a moment one night, about 6 months before I met you. A moment, she says. As in a one-night stand? No, I say. No, we never even kissed until last night. I don't know, I can't explain it. We just had this sort of flirtation thing going on for a really long time and it finally came to a head last night. That's all. She picks up her coffee again and takes a slow drink from it. She stares down at the floor for a while and I can't help but notice she looks a little sad. Alyssa? You're not mad at me, are you? She immediately shakes her head. No, Lily. She sets down her coffee cup again. I just know my brother. And I love him. I really do. But what? Alyssa and I both look in the direction of the voice. Ryle is standing in the doorway with his arms folded across his chest. He's wearing a pair of gray jogging pants that are barely hanging on to his hips. No shirt. I'll be adding this outfit to all the other ones I've cataloged in my head. Ryle pushes off the door and makes his way into the kitchen. He walks over to me and takes my cup of coffee out of my hands. He leans in and kisses me on the forehead, then takes a drink as he leans against the counter. I didn't mean to interrupt, he says to Alyssa. By all means, continue your conversation. Alyssa rolls her eyes and says, stop. He hands me back my cup of coffee and turns around to grab his own mug. He begins to pour from the pot. It sounded to me like you were about to give Lily a warning. I'm just curious as to what you have to say. Alyssa hops off the counter and carries her mug to the sink. She's my friend, Ryle. You don't have the best track record when it comes to relationships. She washes out the mug and then leans her hip into the sink, facing us. As her friend, I have the right to give her my opinion when it comes to the guys she dates. That's what friends do. I'm suddenly feeling uncomfortable as the tension grows thicker between the two of them. Ryle doesn't even take a drink of his coffee. He walks toward Alyssa and pours it out in the sink. He's standing right in front of her, but she won't even look at him. Well, as your brother, I would hope you had a little more faith in me than you do. That's what siblings do. He walks out of the kitchen, shoving the door open. When he's gone, Alyssa takes a deep breath. She shakes her head and pulls her hands up to her face. Sorry about that, she says, forcing a smile. I need to shower. You don't have people for that? She laughs as she exits the kitchen. I wash my mug in the sink and head back to Ryle's bedroom. When I open the door, he's sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He doesn't look up at me when I walk in and for a second, I think he might be mad at me, too. But then he tosses his phone aside and leans back into the couch. Come here, he says. He grabs my hand and pulls me down on top of him so that I'm straddling him. He brings my mouth to his and kisses me so hard, it makes me wonder if he's trying to prove his sister wrong. Ryle pulls away from my mouth and slowly rakes his eyes down my body. I like you in my clothes. I smile. Well, I have to get to work, so unfortunately, I can't keep them on. He brushes the hair from my face and says, I have a really important surgery coming up that I need to prepare for. Which means I probably won't see you for a few days. I try to hide my disappointment, but I have to get used to it if he really wants to try and make something work between us. He's already warned me that he works too much. I'm busy, too. Grand opening is on Friday. He says, "Oh, I'll see you before Friday." Promise. I don't hide my grin this time. Okay. He kisses me again, this time for a solid minute. He starts to lower me to the couch, but then he shoves away from me and says, "Nope. I like you too much to make out with you." I lie down on the couch and watch him get dressed for work. To my enjoyment, he puts on scrubs. Chapter 8. We need to talk, Lucy says. She's sitting on the couch, mascara streaked down her cheeks. Oh, shit. I drop my purse and rush over to her. As soon as I sit down next to her, she starts crying. What's wrong? Did Alex break up with you? She starts shaking her head and then I really start freaking out. Please don't say cancer. I grab her hand, and that's when I see it. Lucy. You're engaged? She nods. I'm sorry. I know we still have 6 months left on the lease, but he wants me to move in with him. I stare at her for a minute. Is that why she's crying? Because she wants out of her lease? She reaches for a tissue and starts dabbing at her eyes. I feel awful, Lily. You're going to be all alone. I'm moving and you won't have anyone. What the? Lucy? I'll be fine. I promise. She looks up at me with hope in her expression. Really? Why in the world does she have this impression of me? I nod again. Yes. I'm not mad, I'm happy for you. She throws her arms around me and hugs me. Oh, thank you, Lily. She starts giggling in between bouts of tears. When she releases me, she jumps up and says, I have to go tell Alex. He was so worried you wouldn't let me out of my lease. She grabs her purse and shoes and disappears out the front door. I lie back on the couch and stare up at the ceiling. Did she just play me? I start laughing, because until this moment, I had no idea how much I've been waiting for this to happen. The whole place to myself. What's even better, is when I do decide to have sex with Ryle, we can have it over here all the time and not have to worry about being quiet. The last time I spoke to Ryle was when I left his apartment on Saturday. We agreed on a trial run. No commitments yet. Just a relationship feeler to see if it's something we both want. It's now Monday night and I'm a little disappointed I haven't heard from him. I gave him my phone number before we parted Saturday, but I don't really know texting etiquette, especially for trial runs. Regardless, I'm not texting him first. I decide to occupy my time with teenage angst and Ellen DeGeneres, instead. I'm not about to wait around to be beckoned by a guy I'm not even having sex with. But I don't know why I assume that reading about the first guy I had sex with will somehow get my mind off the guy I'm not having sex with. Dear Ellen. My great-grandfather's name is Ellis. My entire life, I thought that was a really cool name for such an old guy. After he died, I was reading the obituary. Would you believe that Ellis wasn't even his real name? His real name was Levi Sampson and I had no idea. I asked my grandmother where the name Ellis came from. She said his initials were LS and everyone called him by his initials for so long, they just started sounding them out over the years. Which is why they referred to him as Ellis. I was looking at your name just now and it made me think of that. Ellen. Is that even your real name? You could be just like my great-grandfather and using your initials as a disguise. Ellen. I'm on to you, Ellen. Speaking of names, do you think Atlas is a weird name? It is, isn't it? Yesterday while I was watching your show with him, I asked him where he got his name from. He said he didn't know. Without even thinking, I told him he should ask his mother why she named him that. He just looked over at me for a second and said, "It's a little too late for that." I don't know what he meant by that. I don't know if his mom died, or if she gave him up for adoption. We've been friends for a few weeks now and I still don't really know anything about him or why he doesn't have a place to live. I would just ask him, but I'm not sure if he really trusts me yet. He seems to have trust issues and I guess I can't blame him. I'm worried about him. It started getting really cold this week and it's supposed to be even colder next week. If he doesn't have electricity, that means he doesn't have a heater. I hope he at least has blankets. Do you know how awful I would feel if he froze to death? Pretty freaking awful, Ellen. I'll find some blankets this week and give them to him. Lily. Dear Ellen. It's going to start snowing soon, so I decided to harvest my garden today. I had already pulled the radishes, so I just wanted to put some mulch and compost down, which wouldn't have taken me long, but Atlas insisted on helping. He asked me a lot of questions about gardening and I liked that he seemed interested in my interests. I showed him how to lay the compost and mulch to cover the ground so that the snow wouldn't do too much damage. My garden is small compared to most gardens. Maybe 10 feet by 12 feet. But it's all my dad will let me use of the backyard. Atlas covered the whole thing while I sat cross-legged in the grass and watched him. I wasn't being lazy, he just took over and wanted to do it so I let him. I can tell he's a hard worker. I wonder if maybe keeping himself busy takes his mind off of things and that's why he always wants to help me so much. When he was finished, he walked over and dropped down next to me on the grass. "What made you want to grow things?" he asked. I glanced over at him and he was sitting cross-legged, looking at me curiously. I realized in that moment that he's probably the best friend I've ever had, and we barely know anything about each other. I have friends at school, but they're never allowed to come over to my house for obvious reasons. My mother is always worried something might happen with my father and word might get out about his temper. I also never really get to go to other people's houses, but I'm not sure why. Maybe my father doesn't want me staying over at friends' houses because I might witness how a good husband is supposed to treat his wife. He probably wants me to believe the way he treats my mother is normal. Atlas is the first friend I've ever had that's ever been inside my house. He's also the first friend to know how much I like to garden. And now he's the first friend to ever ask me why I garden. I reached down and pulled at a weed and started tearing it into little pieces while I thought about his question. When I was 10, my mother got me a subscription to a website called Seeds Anonymous, I said. Every month I would get an unmarked package of seeds in the mail with instructions on how to plant them and care for them. I wouldn't know what I was growing until it came up out of the ground. Every day after school I'd run straight to the backyard to see the progress. It gave me something to look forward to. Growing things felt like a reward. I could feel Atlas staring at me when he asked, "A reward for what?" I shrugged. For loving my plants the right way. Plants reward you based on the amount of love you show them. If you're cruel to them or neglect them, they give you nothing. But if you care for them and love them the right way, they reward you with gifts in the form of vegetables or fruits or flowers. I looked down at the weed I was tearing apart in my hands, and there was barely an inch left of it. I wadded it up between my fingers and flicked it. I didn't want to look over at Atlas because I could still feel him staring, so instead, I just stared out over my mulch-covered garden. "We're just alike," he said. My eyes flicked to his. "Me and you?" He shook his head. "No. Plants and humans. Plants need to be loved the right way in order to survive. So do humans. We rely on our parents from birth to love us enough to keep us alive. And if our parents show us the right kind of love, we turn out as better humans overall. But if we're neglected..." His voice grew quiet. Almost sad. He wiped his hands on his knees, trying to get some of the dirt off. If we're neglected, we end up homeless and incapable of anything meaningful. His words made my heart feel like the mulch he had just laid out. I didn't even know what to say to that. Does he really think that about himself? He acted like he was about to get up, but before he did I said his name. He sat back down in the grass. I pointed at the row of trees that lined the fence to the left of the yard. You see that tree over there? In the middle of the row of trees was an oak tree that stood taller than all the rest of the trees. Atlas glanced over at it and dragged his eyes all the way up to the top of the tree. It grew on its own, I said. Most plants do need a lot of care to survive. But some things, like trees, are strong enough to do it by just relying on themselves and nobody else. I had no idea if he knew what I was trying to say without me coming out and saying it. But I just wanted him to know that I thought he was strong enough to survive whatever was going on in his life. I didn't know him well, but I could tell he was resilient. Way more than I would ever be if I were in his situation. His eyes were glued to the tree. It was a long time before he even blinked. When he finally did, he just nodded a little and looked down at the grass. I thought with the way his mouth twitched that he was about to frown, but instead he actually smiled a little. Seeing that smile made my heart feel like I had just startled it right out of a dead sleep. We're just alike, he said, repeating himself from earlier. Plants and humans? I asked. He shook his head. No. Me and you. I gasped, Ellen. I hope he didn't notice, but I definitely sucked in a rush of air. Because what the heck was I supposed to say to that? I just sat there, really awkward and quiet until he stood up. He turned like he was about to walk home. Atlas, wait. He glanced back down at me. I pointed at his hands and said, you might want to take a quick shower before you go back. Compost is made from cow manure. He lifted his hands and looked down at them, and then he looked down at his compost-covered clothes. Cow manure. Seriously? I grinned and nodded. He laughed a little and then, before I knew it, he was on the ground next to me, wiping his hands all over me. We were both laughing as he reached to the bag next to us and stuck his hand inside, then smeared it down my arms. Ellen, I am confident that the next sentence I am about to write has never been written or spoken aloud before. When he was wiping that cow shit on me, it was quite possibly the most turned on I have ever been. After a few minutes, we were both lying on the ground, breathing hard, still laughing. He finally stood up and pulled me to my feet, knowing he couldn't waste minutes if he wanted a shower before my parents came home. Once he was in the shower, I washed my hands in the sink and just stood there, wondering what he meant earlier when he said we were just alike. Was it a compliment? It sure felt like one. Was he saying that he thought I was strong, too? Because I certainly didn't feel strong most of the time. In that moment, just thinking about him made me feel weak. I wondered what I was going to do about the way I was starting to feel when I was around him. I also wondered how long I can keep hiding him from my parents. And how long he'll be staying at that house. Winters in Maine are unbearably cold and he won't survive without a heater. Or blankets. I gathered myself and went in search of all the spare blankets I could find. I was going to give them to him when he got out of the shower, but it was already 5 and he left in a hurry. I'll give them to him tomorrow. Lily. Dear Ellen. Harry Connick Jr. is freaking hilarious. I'm not sure if you've ever had him on your show, because I hate to admit I've probably missed an episode or two since you've been on the air, but if you've never had him, you should. Actually, have you ever watched Late Night with Conan O'Brien? He has this guy named Andy who sits on the couch for every episode. I wish Harry could sit on your couch for every episode. He just has the best one-liners, and the two of you together would be epic. I just want to say thank you. I know that you don't have a show on TV for the sole purpose of making me laugh, but sometimes it feels that way. Sometimes my life just makes me feel like I've lost the ability to laugh or smile, but then I turn on your show and no matter what mood I'm in when I turn on the TV, I always feel better by the time your show is over. So yeah. Thanks for that. I know you probably want an update on Atlas, and I'll give you one in a second. But first I need to tell you about what happened yesterday. My mother is a teaching assistant over at Brimmer Elementary. It's a bit of a drive and that's why she never gets home until around 5 o'clock. My dad works 2 miles from here, so he's always home right after 5. We have a garage, but only one car can fit in it because of all my dad's stuff. My dad keeps his car in the garage and my mom keeps her car in the driveway. Well, yesterday my mom got home a little bit early. Atlas was still at the house and we were almost finished watching your show when I heard the garage door start to open. He ran out the back door and I rushed around the living room cleaning up our soda cans and snacks. It had started snowing really hard around lunchtime yesterday and my mother had a lot of stuff to carry in, so she pulled up in the garage so she could bring it all in through the kitchen door. It was work stuff and a few groceries. I was helping her bring everything inside when my dad pulled up in the driveway. He started honking his horn because he was mad that my mom was parked in the garage. I guess he didn't want to have to get out of his car in the snow. That's the only thing I can think of that would make him want her to move her car right then and there, instead of just waiting until she was finished unloading it. Come to think of it, why does my father always get the garage? You would think a man wouldn't want the woman he loves to get the shittier parking spot. Anyway, my mother got that real scared look in her eye when he started honking and she told me to take all her stuff to the table, while she moved her car out. I'm not sure what happened when she went back outside. I heard a crash, and then I heard her scream, so I ran to the garage thinking maybe she had slipped on ice. Ellen. I don't even want to describe what happened next. I'm still a little shocked by the whole thing. I opened the garage door and didn't see my mom. I just saw my dad behind the car doing something. I took a step closer and realized why I couldn't see my mom. He had her pushed down on the hood with his hands around her throat. He was choking her, Ellen. I might cry just thinking about it. He was yelling at her, staring down at her with so much hatred. Something about not having respect for how hard he works. I don't know why he was mad, really, because all I could hear was her silence while she struggled to breathe. The next few minutes are a blur, but I know I started screaming at him. I jumped on his back and I was hitting him on the side of his head. Then I wasn't. I don't really know what happened, but I'm guessing he threw me off of him. I just remembered 1 second I was on his back and the next second I was on the ground and my forehead hurt like you wouldn't believe. My mom was sitting next to me, holding my head and telling me she was sorry. I looked around for my dad, but he wasn't there. He'd gotten into his car and drove off after I hit my head. My mom gave me a rag and told me to hold it to my head because it was bleeding and then she helped me to her car and drove me to the hospital. On the way there she only said one thing to me. When they ask you what happened, tell them you slipped on the ice. When she said that, I just looked out my window and started crying. Because I thought for sure this was the final straw. That she would leave him now that he had hurt me. That was the moment I realized that she'd never leave him. I felt so defeated, but I was too scared to say anything to her about it. I had to get 9 stitches in my forehead. I'm still not sure what I hit my head on, but it doesn't really matter. The fact is, my father was the reason I was hurt and he didn't even stay and check on me. He just left us both there on the floor of the garage and left. I got home really late last night and fell right to sleep because they had given me some kind of pain pill. This morning when I walked to the bus, I tried not to look directly at Atlas so he wouldn't see my forehead. I had fixed my hair so that you couldn't really see it and he didn't notice right away. When we sat down next to each other on the bus, our hands touched when we were putting our stuff on the floor. His hands were like ice, Ellen. Ice. That's when I realized that I forgot to give him the blankets I had pulled out for him yesterday, because my mother got home sooner than I expected. The incident in the garage sort of took over all my thoughts and I completely forgot about him. It had snowed and iced all night and he had been over there at that house in the dark all by himself. And now he was so cold, I didn't know how he was even functioning. I grabbed both of his hands in mine and said, "Atlas. You're freezing." He didn't say anything. I just started rubbing his hands in mine to warm them up. I laid my head on his shoulder and then I did the most embarrassing thing. I just started to cry. I don't cry very much, but I was still so upset by what happened yesterday, and then I was feeling so guilty that I forgot to take him blankets, and it all hit me right there on the ride to school. He didn't say anything. He just pulled his hands from mine so I'd stop rubbing them, and then he laid his hands on top of mine. We just sat there like that the whole ride to school with our heads leaned together and his hands on top of mine. I might have thought it was sweet if it wasn't so sad. On the ride home from school is when he finally noticed my head. Honestly, I had forgotten about it. No one at school even asked me about it, and when he sat down next to me on the bus, I wasn't even trying to hide it with my hair. He looked right at me and said, "What happened to your head?" I didn't know what to say to him. I just touched it with my fingers and then looked out the window. I've been trying to get him to trust me more in hopes he would tell me why he doesn't have a place to live, so I didn't want to lie to him. I just didn't want to tell him the truth either. When the bus started moving, he said, "Yesterday after I left your house, I heard something going on over there. I heard yelling. I heard you scream, and then I saw your father leave. I was going to come check on you to make sure everything was okay, but as I was walking over I saw you leaving in the car with your mother." He must have heard the fight in the garage and saw her leaving to take me to get the stitches. I couldn't believe he came over to our house. Do you know what my dad would do to him if he saw him wearing his clothes? I got so worried for him because I don't think he knows what my father is capable of. I looked at him and said, "Atlas, you can't do that. You can't come to my house when my parents are home." Atlas got real quiet and then said, "I heard you scream, Lily." He said it like me being in danger trumped anything else. I felt bad because I know he was just trying to help, but that would have made things so much worse. I said to him. As soon as I said it, I felt bad for lying. And to be honest, he looked a little disappointed in me, because I think we both knew in that moment that it wasn't as simple as a fall. Then he pulled up the sleeve of his shirt and held out his arm. Ellen, my stomach dropped. It was so bad. All over his arm he had these small scars. Some of the scars looked just like someone had stuck a cigarette to his arm and held it there. He twisted his arm around so I could see that it was on the other side, too. I used to fall a lot, too, Lily. Then he pulled his shirt sleeve down and didn't say anything else. For a second I wanted to tell him it wasn't like that my dad never hurts me and that he was just trying to get me off of him. But then I realized I'd be using the same excuses my mom uses. I felt a little embarrassed that he knows what goes on at my house. I spent the whole rest of the bus ride looking out the window because I didn't know what to say to him. When we got home, my mom's car was there. In the driveway, of course. Not the garage. That meant Atlas couldn't come over and watch your show with me. I was gonna tell him I would bring him blankets later, but when he got off the bus he didn't even tell me.
Bye.
He just started walking down the street like he was mad. It's dark now and I'm waiting on my parents to go to sleep. But in a little while I'm gonna take him some blankets. Lily. Dear Ellen. I'm in way over my head. Do you ever do things you know are wrong, but are somehow also right? I don't know how to put it in simpler terms than that. I mean, I'm only 15 and I certainly shouldn't have boys spending the night in my bedroom. But if a person knows someone needs a place to stay, isn't it that person's responsibility as a human to help them? Last night, after my parents went to sleep, I snuck out the back door to take Atlas those blankets. I took a flashlight with me because it was dark. It was still snowing really hard, so by the time I made it to that house, I was freezing. I beat on the back door, and as soon as he opened it, I pushed past him to get out of the cold. Only. I didn't get out of the cold. Somehow, it felt even colder inside that old house. I still had my flashlight on and I shined it around the living room and kitchen. There wasn't anything in there, Ellen. No couch, no chair, no mattress. I handed the blankets off to him and kept looking around me. There was a big hole in the roof over the kitchen and wind and snow were just pouring in. When I shined my light around the living room, I saw his stuff in one of the corners. His backpack, plus the backpack I'd given him. There was a little pile of other stuff I'd given him, like some of my dad's clothes. And then there were 2 towels on the floor. One I guess he laid on and one he covered up with. I put my hand over my mouth because I was so horrified. He'd been there living like that for weeks. Atlas put his hand on my back and tried to walk me back out the door. You shouldn't be over here, Lily, he said. You could get in trouble. That's when I grabbed his hand and said, you shouldn't be here either. I started to pull him out the front door with me, but he yanked his hand back. That's when I said, you can sleep on my floor tonight. I'll keep my bedroom door locked. You can't sleep here, Atlas. It's too cold and you'll get pneumonia and die. He looked like he didn't know what to do. I'm sure the thought of being caught in my bedroom was just as scary as getting pneumonia and dying. He looked back at his spot in the living room and then he just nodded his head once and said, okay. So you tell me, Ellen. Was I wrong letting him sleep in my room last night? It doesn't feel wrong. It felt like the right thing to do. But I sure would get in a lot of trouble if we had been caught. He slept on the floor, so it's not like it was anything more than me just giving him somewhere warm to sleep. I did learn a little more about him last night. After I snuck him in the back door and to my room, I locked my door and made a pallet for him on the floor next to my bed. I set the alarm for 6 a.m. and told him he'd have to get up and leave before my parents woke up, since sometimes my mom wakes me up in the mornings. I crawled in my bed and scooted over to the edge of it so I could look down at him while we talked for a little while. I asked him how long he thought he might stay there and he said he didn't know. That's when I asked him how he ended up there. My lamp was still on, and we were whispering, but he got real quiet when I said that. He just stared up at me with his hands behind his head for a moment. Then he said, I don't know my real dad. He never had anything to do with me. It's always just been me and my mom, but she got remarried about 5 years ago to a guy who never really liked me much. We fought a lot. When I turned 18 a few months ago, we got in a big fight and he kicked me out of the house. He took a deep breath like he didn't want to tell me anymore. But then he started talking again. I've been staying with a friend of mine and his family since then, but his dad got a transfer to Colorado and they moved. They couldn't take me with them, of course. His parents were just being nice by letting me stay with them and I knew that, so I told them I talked to my mom and that I was moving back home. The day they left, I didn't have anywhere to go. So I went back home and told my mom I'd like to move back in until I graduated. She wouldn't let me. Said it would upset my stepfather. He turned his head and looked at the wall. So I just wandered around for a few days until I saw that house. Figured I would just stay there until something better came along or until I graduated. I'm signed up to go to the Marines come May, so I'm just trying to hang on until then. May is 6 months away, Ellen. 6. I had tears in my eyes when he finished telling me all that. I asked him why he didn't just ask someone if they could help him. He said he tried, but it's harder for an adult than a kid, and he's already 18. He said someone gave him a number for some shelters who might help him. There were 3 shelters in a 20-mile radius of our town, but 2 of them were for battered women. The other one was a homeless shelter, but they only had a few beds and it was too far away for him to walk there if he wanted to go to school every day. Plus, you have to wait in a long line to try and get a bed. He said he tried it once, but he feels safer in that old house than he did at the shelter. Like the naive girl I am when it comes to situations like his, I said, but aren't there other options? Can't you just tell the school counselor what your mom did? He shook his head and said he's too old for foster care. He's 18, so his mother can't get in trouble for not allowing him to go back home. He said he called about getting food stamps last week, but he didn't have a ride or money to get to his appointment. Not to mention he doesn't have a car, so he can't very well find a job. He said he's been looking, though. After he leaves my house in the afternoons he goes and applies at places, but he doesn't have an address or a phone number to put down on the application, so that makes it harder for him. I swear, Ellen, every question I threw at him, he had an answer for. It's like he's tried everything not to be stuck in the situation he's in, but there isn't enough help out there for people like him. I got so mad at his whole situation, I told him he was crazy for wanting to go into the military. I wasn't so much whispering when I said, "Why in the heck would you want to serve a country that has allowed you to end up in this kind of situation?" You know what he said next, Ellen? His eyes grew sad and he said, "It's not this country's fault my mother doesn't give a shit about me." Then he reached up and turned off my lamp. "Good night, Lily," he said. I didn't sleep much after that. I was too mad. I'm not even sure who I'm mad at. I just kept thinking about our country and the whole world and how screwed up it is that people don't do more for each other. I don't know when humans started only looking out for themselves. Maybe it's always been this way. It made me wonder how many people out there were just like Atlas. It made me wonder if there were other kids at our school who might be homeless. I go to school every day and internally complain about it most of the time, but I've never once thought that school might be the only home some kids have. It's the only place Atlas can go and know he'll have food. I'll never be able to respect rich people now, knowing they willingly choose to spend their money on materialistic things rather than using it to help other people. No offense, Ellen. I know you're rich, but I guess I'm not referring to people like you. I've seen all the stuff you've done for others on your show and all the charities you support. But I know there are a lot of rich people out there who are selfish. Hell, there are even selfish poor people. And selfish middle-class people. Look at my parents. We aren't rich, but we certainly aren't too poor to help other people. Yet, I don't think my dad has ever done anything for a charity. I remember one time we were walking into a grocery store and an old man was ringing a bell for the Salvation Army. I asked my dad if we could give him some money and he told me no, that he works hard for his money and he wasn't about to let me give it away. He said it isn't his fault that other people don't want to work. He spent the whole time we were in the grocery store telling me about how people take advantage of the government, and until the government stops helping those people by giving them handouts, the problem won't ever go away. Ellen, I believed him. That was 3 years ago, and all this time I thought homeless people were homeless because they were lazy or drug addicts, or just didn't want to work like other people. But now I know that's not true. Sure, some of what he said was true to an extent, but he was using the worst-case scenarios. Not everyone is homeless because they choose to be. They're homeless because there isn't enough help to go around. And people like my father are the problem. Instead of helping others, people use the worst-case scenarios to excuse their own selfishness and greed. I'll never be like that. I swear to you, when I grow up, I'm going to do everything I can to help other people. I'll be like you, Ellen. Just probably not as rich. Lily. Chapter 9. I dropped the journal on my chest. I'm surprised to feel tears running down my cheeks. Every time I pick up this journal I think I'll be fine, that it all happened so long ago and I won't still feel what I felt back then. I'm such a sap. It gives me this longing to hug so many people from my past. Especially my mother, because for the past year, I haven't really thought about everything she had to go through before my father died. I know it probably still hurts her. I grab my phone to call her and look at the screen. There are 4 missed texts from Ryle. My heart immediately skips. I can't believe I had it on silent. Then I roll my eyes, annoyed with myself, because I should not be this excited. Ryle, are you asleep? Ryle, I guess so. Ryle, Lily. Ryle, sad face. The sad face was sent 10 minutes ago. I hit reply and type, nope. Not asleep. About 10 seconds later, I get another text. Ryle, good. I'm walking up your stairs right now. Be there in 20 seconds. I grin and jump out of bed. I go to the bathroom and check my face. Good enough. I run to the front door and open it as soon as Ryle makes it up the stairwell. He practically drags himself up the top step, and then stops to rest when he finally reaches my door. He looks so tired. His eyes are red and there are dark circles under them. His arms slip around my waist and he pulls me to him, burying his face in my neck. You smell so good, he says. I pull him inside the apartment. Are you hungry? I can make you something to eat. He shakes his head as he wrestles out of his jacket, so I skip the kitchen and head for the bedroom. He follows me, and then throws his jacket over the back of the chair. He kicks off his shoes and pushes them against the wall. He's wearing scrubs. You look exhausted, I say. He smiles and puts his hands on my hips. I am. I just assisted in an 18-hour surgery. He bends down and kisses the heart tattoo on my collarbone. No wonder he's exhausted. How is that even possible? I say. 18 hours? He nods and then walks me to the side of the bed where he pulls me down next to him. We adjust ourselves until we're facing each other, sharing a pillow. Yeah, but it was amazing. Groundbreaking. They'll write about it in medical journals, and I got to be there, so I'm not complaining. I'm just really tired. I lean in and give him a peck on the mouth. He brings his hand to the side of my head and pulls back. I know you're probably ready to have hot, sweaty sex, but I don't have the energy tonight. I'm sorry. But I've missed you and for some reason I sleep better when I sleep next to you. Is it okay that I'm here? I smile. It's more than okay. He leans in and kisses my forehead. He grabs my hand and then holds it between us on the pillow. His eyes close, but I keep mine open and stare at him. He has the type of face that people shy away from, because you could get lost in it. And to think, I get to look at this face all the time. I don't have to be modest and look away, because he's